Hi, and welcome to ScienceGal Aquatics. I'm Kerri, and today I wanted to grab a group of friends together and help answer the question, is there really a best way to introduce new fish to your tanks? It's something I've honestly wondered if I've done correctly or not. If this is your first time here, make sure you do subscribe to the channel because it's just more fun now that you're here. If it's not your first time here, help share out this video, but make sure you do leave me a comment and let me know how you introduce new fish to your tanks. But is there really a best way to do this? Let's find out. Let's
go. The best way to introduce a new tank mate to your tank. I think the biggest mistake a lot of people make is that they assume that those fish are going to get along. And sometimes you'll add a new tank mate and you take a picture of it and then you go eat dinner and forget about it for a week. And you go, oh, maybe you'll see it, but you need to really observe it. You need to really observe how it interacts. And it gets more important as time goes by. So an hour after your fish has been added to the tank, it's still kind of newly acclimated and stuff. But if it's going to be real aggressive or something else is going to be real aggressive to it, it might start showing about then. Unless you add a fish to a tank and something's like outright attacking it. So I've had different fish just become mortal enemies like overnight. So you really need to go back like the next day or a couple hours later or the next day and kind of really sit in there and watch what's going on. Because sometimes even fish that are kind of peaceful with other fish, like I have a yo-yo loach and he hates all bristlenose catfish, and I don't know why. No matter when I put those two together, those two species together, they fight. So yeah, you never know what kind of mortal enemy might be lurking there. My advice to you is to check it out. Be sure to check it out an hour afterwards, a day afterwards, and then continue to be vigilant and watch for changes.
Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics. What is the best way to add new fish to an existing community? First, we always quarantine our fish, so our fish are coming from a quarantine tank. That being said, we will usually catch our fish from the quarantine tank, put them in a specimen container. We generally add the fish to our community tanks when the lights are off. All fish are going to be curious when you add new inhabitants to a tank. It's just going to save a little bit of stress where the new fish are trying to figure out their brand new environment, where to go, what's going on. They really don't want to be bombarded by other fish in this process. So usually, lights are off, new fish go in after they've been quarantined for 4 weeks, and then when the lights come back on, generally speaking, we'll feed them, allow the fish to eat, and that should reduce the issues that you have when adding new fish to a tank. So that's what we do. Thanks for having me on.
So what is the best way to introduce a new tank mate to your tank? In my opinion, I think I'm going to focus on bettas because that's kind of my little specialty right here. If you want to introduce a betta to a community tank, the best thing you can do is get one of those little breeder boxes that kind of float for guppies and put your betta in there for, I would say, a minimum of a week, but I think the sweet spot is about 2 weeks, and then allow your fish to see all the fish that are in the tank, and he might flare, he might get really sassy, he might want to chase them, but then after a while he's gonna kind of get bored of it and then realize that none of the other fish are threats. So by the time you reintroduce him, kind of by releasing him into the tank, it will hopefully reduce a lot of chasing and aggression. Now there is one little thing that you need to look out for, and that is if throughout that 1 to 2 week period, your betta is constantly flaring, constantly being angry, constantly trying to murder all the fish while he's in his little breeder box, that can be an indicator that your betta is too aggressive and not a good candidate for a community tank. And in that case, it would be best to put him in his own betta only tank, but at least you would have known, early on without having to find out after your betta has murdered dramatically all your other fish in the community tank. We want to prevent these kind of things. So hopefully you will find this little Hopefully you will find this little tip helpful.
The best way to introduce a new tank mate into your tank is to know whether or not that tank mate is going to be okay before you even buy it. I know this is probably like a broken record. You've probably heard it 5 times in this video already, but do your research on those fish before you even buy them. Don't lose control of your impulses and just see a pretty fish, buy a pretty fish, and then figure out whether or not it's going to be okay. Don't do that. You're just torturing the fish and you're wasting money. Just don't fool with that. You're in the store, do a quick Google search, see what those fish are compatible with before you spend money and potentially send that fish to its death, or the other fish that you already have, sending them to their death. You don't want to do that either. So do your research before you buy the fish. And then once you have it, the biggest piece of advice I would give is to know what you're going to do if things go wrong. So whether it's having a breeder box or a spare tank or a hospital tank or something like that, know exactly what you're going to do if you put that fish in there and all you know what breaks loose. Know what you're going to do to solve that problem until you can take it back to the store or whatever it is that you're going to do. So have that backup plan before you ever put that fish in the water, and also know whether that fish is going to survive when it goes in the water or not. And then you should be fine. Don't spend money until you know that that fish is going to be okay with yours.
The best way to introduce a new tank mate to your tank is to introduce a nice, friendly, happy tank mate to a nice, friendly, happy tank. I'm a fan of peace and harmony in the fish room, so it's rare that I'll keep anything that doesn't get along with practically everything else. The main concern in my community tanks is the universal rule that whatever can fit in a fish's mouth is fair game for snacking. In terms of iffy tank mates, most of my experience is with bettas. Their personalities are going to vary, and there is no guarantee that your betta won't murder everything that moves. But you can do a few things to improve your chances of it working out. For starters, you can temporarily relocate a territorial fish and let the new tank mate settle in without him. You can try moving elements of the scape around, a little bit of redecorating to help reset any established territories. And then, reintroduce the territorial fish, perhaps while the lights are off. Or embrace peace and harmony in happy sunshine community tanks.
In my opinion, as far as introducing a new fish to your aquarium, it's going to depend a lot on the fish you already have and what fish you're introducing. If we're talking about, let's say, African cichlids, I would definitely be cautious and make sure you buy 3 or 4 of them, and that way when you do put them in the tank with your other African cichlids, they're not focusing on that one single fish. They have 4 new ones to chase around. Another way to help with that aggression would be to rearrange the tank a little bit so that, there's no specific territory for the tank boss to take over and fight over when the new fish are in there. Again, it's all going to depend on what fish you put in the tank and what fish you currently have. I was just using the African cichlids as an example of those kinds of fish. So do your research, make sure they're compatible, and good luck.
What's the best way to introduce new fish to one of your fish tanks you've already got currently running? That is a great question because there's so many different types of fish. Cichlids might bully the new guy on the block. You just never quite know what's going to happen. There's so many different ways. Like if you see a cichlid getting beat up, maybe you rearrange it, the tank. If it's just one aggressive guy beating him up, you can just pull the super aggressive fish out and put them in timeout for a little while. There's a lot of different tricks you can do. Most of my fish are guppies, and I keep them pretty much all line bred, so there's not too many new guys going into each other's tanks, but I hope that helped.
So I don't know if I know the best way to introduce new fish into a fish tank. I just know what I do. And here, what I do, especially for my African cichlids, my mbunas, I only add 3 or more at a time, and before I add them, right before I add them, I rearrange their hiding spots, I rearrange their territories, and as I'm rearranging, I'm adding the fish to them. They're so busy trying to find their new territory and adding 3 or more at the same time, they're not picking on one in particular. But that's just for those cichlids. If I'm going to introduce neon tetras, to an already school of Neotetras after quarantine period, plop and drop. I just plop and drop. So I guess it would depend on what fish that I'm adding to the tank. But I definitely, especially with the cichlids, put that distraction in there. Make sure it's not just one new fish so that they can all pick on them. That's how I do it.
So when I introduce new fish to my tank, I typically do it. I'll feed the tank in the corner, let the fish, get a little food in their systems, and I turn the light off. Turn the light off. I add my fish. They're in the net at this point. I add the fish in the net. They're now released into the tank, and then I just leave the light off. I usually leave the light off for the rest of the day. Don't turn it on until the next day. With the light off, everybody feels a little more calm and zened out. So you're not going to have, craziness, stressing, and you just fed. The fish aren't going to be looking to pick on any of the new guys you add to your tank. For the most part, aside from like African cichlids and stuff, I've never really had an issue with adding new fish to the tank. Like when I the lights off in that tank for like a week, just so that they could get de-stressed and get used to the new surroundings before I even thought about turning that light on.
Guys, Joe Shrimp Shack here, and you had another burning question. The second burning question that I was asked of me is best way to introduce a new tank mate. So what I tend to do is I wait till the lights go off, or I shut my lights off. Then I wait a half hour because it's usually when fish go a little bit dormant. Then I do the drip acclimation to get my fish up to the water parameter of what they're in my tank. And then I introduce them to that tank, and then I watch. So usually fish will be dormant, so you're going to notice if they're going to start getting together right away or when the lights come back on. If they're not good tank mates, I remove the one I just introduced and I put it into a different tank. Thanks, guys. I'm ready for your next question.
So when I do bring new fish into the fish room and I'm ready to introduce them into a new tank, really the one thing I try to do is make sure this process is as stress-free as I possibly can. There's going to be some stress, but I really try to make this process as easy on the fish as I can. So while they're acclimating, I will go ahead and feed all the fish that are already in that tank, the shrimp, the plecos, just anything that's in that tank, I will go ahead and feed while the new fish are acclimating, and I will turn off the light. When they're done acclimating, I will put them through an aquarium net and drain off all of the old water and then just simply scoop them into the tank. But again, I will feed the fish that are already in there and I will turn off the light. And again, just try to make this process as stress-free as I can on the fish that are coming into the fish room. And I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you found this topic as interesting as I did. And leave me a comment down below. I'm really curious on how you introduce fish to your aquariums. But again, thank you so much for watching. Enjoy!